finally here, and while there have been a ton of mysteries, lore drops, and more to talk about over the next couple weeks, the first thing I want to focus on is the extremely mysterious ending of the chapter, where today I'll explain the entire thing from its plot twists, reveals, and even hints for what we can expect from Chapter 5 already. So as a bit of a quick breakdown, in Chapter 4 we start off by exploring the caves while Poppy goes to retrieve Kissy, and later coming upon the prison, where after meeting up with our new ally Doughy the Doughman, we are introduced to the safe haven that he was the protector of, with many remaining toys after the Hour of Joy, including some that could heal Kissy's wounds, who also survived by the way and was down here with us. And afterward we are tasked with acquiring the Omni Hand from Dr. Sawyer by going through his evil pet Yarnaby and defeating him once and for all, so we could access their private generator they needed to repair before it lost power and the prototype could come in and destroy their home. Which after doing so, Poppy revealed to us our goal with entering the factory was to go as deep into it as possible and burn it from the bottom up. However, while placing these explosives down, we returned to the safe haven to find that while we were gone, the prototype had mysteriously broken in and stolen our explosives, destroying everything in the haven and killing every toy Doughy worked so hard to protect, causing him to snap and turn against us, which, spoiler alert, I have a ton of theories for why all this happened, so make sure to subscribe to not miss that because it is deep. But after Doughy goes completely crazy, changing his entire form and giving us a super long chase sequence and even a boss fight, we eventually defeat the Doughman once and for all, crushing him, allowing for us to search for the remaining survivors of the wreckage, where we conveniently find Poppy and Kissy safe inside of a ventilation system. However, not long after this, Poppy tries to reach out to Ollie, who is in the game by the way, he only appears a couple times, but when doing this, Ollie confidently announces our exact position,
Shelf ventilation block B6,
and reveals that this entire time he was actually in fact the prototype mimicking the voice of the child Ollie for years.
Who is this?
An obvious question with an obvious answer.
Tricking Poppy and all of us into trusting him. Afterwards, the prototype asks Poppy to join him, causing her to completely panic and run away, leaving just us and Kissy, where the prototype then intercepts the rest of our explosives from earlier and blows up the building, leaving just the remains of Kissy's arm by our side. Then we make our way into the next and final location for all of Poppy Playtime, the labs, where our first sight upon walking in is a beautiful garden of poppies laying all across, leading us to a small room also including poppy flowers, which gives us a final VHS tape from Leith Pierre, a security brief of the area parodying the original one back in Chapter 1, but this time much more sinister, telling us that we were going to be shot on sight upon entering the labs.
When someone finds you down here, you will be shot.
While he boasts about his wonderful security, right at the perfect time for a big blue furball to make his way back into the game, who attacks us through the glass, which is where the entire chapter finally ends. So now, to break all of this down, I want to break it up into two mini sections: the Poppy betrayal scene and the actual ending when we walk into the labs. And first, starting with Poppy's quote-unquote betrayal, as we mentioned, Poppy gets extremely surprised upon finding out Ollie this entire time was actually just the prototype. And when she asked if there ever was an Ollie, he said,
Yes, there was.
But that was a very long time ago.
Which is interesting because when playing through Chapter 4, we actually got ourselves a tape showing a conversation between Poppy and Ollie, where Ollie calls Poppy as she's in tears and panic from these scientists digging inside of her and pulling out her body parts to try and see what made her, saying,
It's been weeks and weeks of taking things out and putting them back in and taking things out and putting them back in.
as Ollie comforts her.
I'm here, Poppy. For you, I'll always be here.
Now, was this the real Ollie or the prototype? I honestly don't know, but either way, this makes this betrayal so much more important, knowing that one of her only friends, Ollie, was gone, and now the prototype knew everything about her whereabouts. But why did he want to know this? Well, later on in the encounter, the prototype tells us what he plans to do.
I'm going to
Come up there.
and I'm going to
Find your collaborators. The few you have left, they will be dealt with.
Implying, of course, he was going to kill us, the player, and Kissy. And when she asked what he was going to do with her if he found us, he said,
I've got something special in mind.
I prepared it just for you.
And this one, you will never want to leave.
which seems to be a callback all the way to Poppy's case that she was kept in when we found her at the start, that she was so desperate to leave when we freed her in chapter 1, suggesting the prototype was the one who originally put her inside that case, and this time after he got her, he was going to keep her locked up in a place she wouldn't want to leave. Now, of course, leaving the question, why did the prototype want to lock Poppy up so badly? Well, he goes on, saying,
I admit I'm disappointed.
After all that time in your case, I'd hoped you'd see things
Differently, don't you understand?
always been about you.
And we're what we are.
concluding by saying,
It's time to come home.
Poppy.
causing her to panic, yelling,
I can't go back in the case. I can't. I'm sorry.
before running away, leaving us and Kissy alone to deal with the explosion. So clearly, the prototype in some way had a major disagreement with Poppy, causing him to have to lock her up in solitude, which was such a scary thought to her that she chose to betray us at the mere mention of going back. But then, what does all of this mean? Well, as for Poppy and the prototype's relationship, back during the Doughy the Doughman fight, we could actually see on the Nightmare Critters during the chase scene here, there was a red VHS tape we could grab, which when finishing the boss fight, we could play, revealing a new audio where we actually heard Poppy talking to herself about the prototype, following what I think is the hour of joy where she said,
It was awful. So awful. I thought we were gonna leave the factory. Not this. Prototype says we can't leave. Not now, not ever. I hate him. And I hate this place. And I hate that he's right. He explained everything, and he's right. We can't leave. It's too risky. What they did to us, we can't ever let it happen to us or anyone ever again.
which from what I've gathered explains to us that at some point there was an interaction between Poppy and the prototype, where Poppy, again after what I think was the hour of joy, wanted to escape and leave the factory, while the prototype wanted everybody to stay. For one, obviously because he wanted to control all of the toys, but also something they likely didn't consider is that now that they were toys, they couldn't just leave the factory and have the public find out about the experiments. It was too risky, as Poppy says. Nor could they live a normal life like that anyway, which presumably gave her the idea when we see her throughout the game to want to try and blow the place up using explosives and ensure this doesn't happen to anybody ever again. But despite this, when threatened with going into her case, she seemingly betrays us by running away. And while I'm sure people will be quick to call this out as Poppy being an evil villain all along and not really caring about us, I actually think it's a bit more complicated than that. Because when we go into the safe haven, there is a lot of talk about Poppy finally returning after apparently leaving the factory. They have murals on the wall writing about how she left and how they miss her, and the toys are all talking about her and why she returned when we explore the area.
What's Poppy doing here? I mean, how do we even know we can trust her this time?
And while as of right now, why she left Safe Haven, leading presumably to her being locked up by 1006, is a theory for another day, what matters is that this shows a pattern that Poppy is generally a coward, and was foreshadowing to us that in tough situations, she tends to simply run away. We even saw this in chapter 3 when right after the train crash, she's just gone. Which, while this could be interpreted as Poppy being selfish and showing she's a backstabber, I also think this could just be Poppy being traumatized and scared, not knowing what to do in high pressure situations and panicking, since after all, she is still a young child. And I do mean a now confirmed child, because later in her VHS tape, she reminisces on missing her father that she confirms is Elliot Ludwig.
I wish you were here, Dad. I could really use one of your talks right about now. When you were running this place, you always knew what to say.
So that all makes a lot of sense. The prototype locked Poppy up to keep her from running away or burning down the factory, and upon her escaping her case with the player, the reason she kept telling us in earlier chapters that we were capable and that she needed us is because she saw we can make her way around the factory and was hoping we could help her with her mission. However, now that we're doing it, he is after her once again to keep her away and to keep her from now wanting to burn the entire place down, killing 1006, which when confronted scared her so much, causing her to run away out of panic. But now, following this scene, let's talk about the lab's ending. This is where things get really interesting, as when we first drop, we see this mysterious garden upon our entrance containing a bunch of poppy flowers, which is obviously clearly symbolic of the game and its title, Poppy Playtime, but the purpose of this garden is both simple and confusing. Because while in more recent chapters, the developers have seemingly kind of shied away from discussing the topic, something that was a big mystery in chapters 1 and 2 was the poppy flower and the powers it held. Since the very first experiment created by Elliot Ludwig was, of course, Poppy Playtime, who was made of poppy flowers, or at least was scented like them, and had the ability to talk, think for herself, and generally act like a human turned doll. Something that the scientists of Playtime Co. could never biologically reproduce despite vigorously studying her out of her will, like she talked about with Ollie in her VHS tape. But this led to a lot of speculation around what powers the poppy flower had in the Poppy Playtime universe. We even saw in this chapter 2 document the scientists were testing rats in poppy gel just to see what would happen, again alluding to there being supernatural elements relating to the poppy flower. And while they haven't really gone into depth about what or how they are used, clearly we could see the scientists are growing a whole underground garden purely of the poppy flower right next to the labs where the experiments were presumably created, so they could have them at easy grasp while experimenting, which obviously suggests to us that in some way the poppy was in fact super important to the creation of the toys somehow. Maybe it was like an actual supernatural ability where in the Poppy Playtime universe the flowers gave creatures life, or that it could have a more spiritual explanation where the employees maybe saw the poppy flower as a god, judged from symbols like this one from the Project Playtime ARG, which would make sense since it gave them this mythical, uncreatable being they could study for the future. And so maybe they use poppy flowers as an almost superstition or memorial to the very original. I don't know, but this is clearly a topic that will be focused on more in the final chapter 5. And yes, I did say final. They don't confirm it, but earlier in the game, Poppy did tell us a few things about this lab location, being that the labs was where the prototype was actually keeping the orphan children sleeping that we will obviously want to save first, before we will then burn the entire place down with everyone else in it. But not before we have to make it past 2 final creatures. The prototype, who earlier in the game we actually saw a full design of in a shadow, which definitely looks menacing, and of course the return of Huggy Wuggy, who looks noticeably injured but still hungrier than ever. And while to the naked eye there doesn't look like there's too much to say about Huggy here, he just survived the fall and is back, not really a big deal. However, if you actually look super close at this model, you could see that his injuries have been bandaged up and repaired, meaning that somebody in the factory had actually healed Huggy, more than likely being someone like the prototype, which I found pretty interesting. But then we drift off into sleep from a red gas trap where presumably we will wake up in the lab starting the next game. But other than that, that is chapter 4's entire ending